Have you ever been so wronged by your city that you literally write the book on hell just so you can put your enemies in it? Well, that's exactly what one man did, and his personal torment, his exile, ended up creating one of the greatest masterpieces in all of literature. You've probably heard this line before, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." It's chilling, right? Well, that's the inscription on the gates of hell in Dante Alighieri's epic poem, The Divine Comedy. I mean, that line has echoed through our culture for more than 700 years, a pretty stark warning of what's to come. So who was the guy who literally mapped out hell? Before all that, Dante was a man who was right in the thick of it. I'm talking politics, love, and some seriously bitter conflicts. You see, to really get his journey through the afterlife, we first have to understand the kind of hell he went through right here on Earth. Okay, so let's dive into this. Before Dante Alighieri became this legendary poet, he was a politician. And let me tell you, in 14th century Florence, politics wasn't just a game. It was a dangerous, often deadly one. The entire political scene in medieval Italy was basically split down the middle by one huge question. Are you Team Pope or Team Holy Roman Emperor? Florence was a Guelph city, meaning it sided with the Pope. But as you can imagine, that didn't mean things were peaceful, not by a long shot. Because, of course, the Guelphs couldn't even agree among themselves. They split into two warring factions. You had the Black Guelphs, who wanted the Pope to have even more influence over Florence, and then you had the White Guelphs, and this is Dante's side, who wanted the see to stay independent. This nasty internal feud, well, it was what sealed Dante's fate.
Just look at this timeline, and you can see how fast things went south for him. In 1300, Dante is at the absolute peak of his political career. He's a prior, one of the top dogs in Florence. But just 2 years later, the Black Guelphs take over, and Dante is exiled, with a death sentence hanging over his head. And it's during this time, while he's wandering, that he writes the Divine Comedy. I mean, his greatest masterpiece was literally born from his darkest moment.
So what were the charges? Corruption, embezzlement, but they were totally trumped up, politically motivated charges brought against him while he wasn't even in the city. He was tried in absentia and bam, death sentence. The very city he loved and fought for was now the one place he could never, ever go back to. And that feeling, that deep, profound sense of injustice, that became the fire, the fuel for his incredible work. So what do you do when you've been stripped of everything? Your home, your status, your citizenship? Well, if you're Dante, you go on a different kind of journey. A journey through the afterlife, through the three realms of the dead, to find the justice, the meaning, and the God that the real world just couldn't give him. He built his masterpiece, which, by the way, he just called the comedy, into three parts. You've got the Inferno, or hell, Purgatorio, purgatory, and Paradiso, or paradise. The whole thing is really an allegory for the soul's journey, starting in the darkness of sin, climbing up the mountain of repentance, and finally reaching God in paradise. But here's the thing, he doesn't go it alone. He has guides. First up is the Roman poet Virgil. Virgil represents human reason, all the logic and philosophy you need to understand sin. But reason alone can only get you so far, right? To get into heaven, Dante needs his second guide, Beatrice. She was the woman he loved in real life, and in the poem, she represents divine faith and grace. So after all the horrors of hell and, the hard work of purgatory, the journey's climax is paradise. This is where it all comes together. Guided by Beatrice, Dante's vision shifts from all that fire and brimstone divine justice to something completely different, overwhelming divine love, order, and peace. Now, the impact of the Divine Comedy is huge, and it goes way beyond just the story. I mean, Dante's journey didn't just give us a literary classic. It's not an exaggeration to say it actually created a language. You have to understand, back in Dante's day, if you were writing something serious, like theology or philosophy, you wrote it in Latin. That was the language of the church, of the super-educated elite. So what Dante did was totally revolutionary. He chose to write his masterpiece in the Tuscan dialect, the Italian that ordinary people actually spoke on the streets. And you really can't overstate how huge this was. It was like he was democratizing knowledge. He was proving that the language of everyday people was just as capable of expressing these big, profound ideas. This one book was so influential that it basically became the foundation for the modern Italian language we know today. I mean, they literally call him the father of the Italian language because of this. It's incredible. Okay, so the comedy is obviously his most famous work, the big one.
But there's another major project from his time in exile that has turned into this really fascinating puzzle for scholars today.
It's called Convivio, which means the banquet. He wrote it in the early years of his exile, and it was this really ambitious philosophical work. The idea was to create a banquet of knowledge for people who didn't have access to, formal university education.
So why is it such a mystery? Well, because what we have left of it today is basically a ghost of what Dante originally intended. Scholars actually call it a virtual text, and that's because trying to piece together the original is, well, it's pretty much an impossible task.
Here's the problem. For one, Dante never even finished it. On top of that, his original manuscript is completely lost. Every single copy that exists today comes from one single, flawed source manuscript that was just full of errors. So trying to figure out what Dante actually wrote is this huge, epic detective story for scholars.
And all this brings us right back to where we started, to the injustice that shaped Dante's entire life. We're going from his condemnation way back in the 14th century to a really extraordinary quest for justice right here in the 21st.
Think about this for a second. For 700 years, 700 years, Dante Alighieri, the father of the Italian language, one of the greatest poets who ever lived, was officially still a condemned criminal in his own hometown of Florence.
Then in 2021, on the 700th anniversary of his death, a group of Italian lawyers and judges started this symbolic effort to review his case. The goal was to go back, look at the evidence, and see if, after all this time, his sentence could finally officially be annulled. But, as his own direct descendant pointed out, pretty poignantly, the damage was already done. Sporello de Ser Alighieri said, it's a noble gesture, but it reminds us of the harsh reality. Dante lived and died in exile, and no modern verdict is ever going to change that fundamental tragedy.
And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Dante used his art to create his own kind of eternal justice, right? He got to put all the popes and politicians he didn't like right into his inferno. But the real world, it's been a lot slower to catch up. And it really makes you wonder, what does justice even mean when it's separated from a person's life by 7 whole centuries of history?